Hello and welcome everyone to the seventh Cool Talk webinar series from UNEP Cool Coalition. The Cool Coalition has brought together today global experts and eminent speakers who from whom we would hear about various approaches, integrated planning approaches for managing urban heat. As we are all aware, urban heat is a growing risk due to the way our cities are being densely planned, impervious surfaces, waste heat being generated from buildings and vehicles, creating the very known phenomena of urban heat islands. Now, to tackle this growing risk, cities need evidence based planning, they need tools, integrated planning approaches, and enabling policy environments. And to discuss this, we have two keynote speakers with us today and global experts with whom we would have a panel discussion. The World Bank has recently published the Handbook for Urban Heat Management in Global South. This is a flagship knowledge product for urban heat planning. We have with us from the World Bank Mehul Jain, who would speak to us about the publication. And we also have Dr. Eleni Mairivilli, whom we favorably call as Linio, who would tell, why cities should actually, how useful the handbook is for the cities. And also she would, speak and tell us about the Beat the Heat initiative of UNEP Coalition. And then we will move forward to the panel discussion, which is joined by global experts who are working globally with various cities, helping them manage urban heat. I would also like to, provide you with a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and the webinar recording, along with an article, would be available to everyone in some time. We would request all participants to kindly keep your cameras and mics on off mode. Participants could post their questions in the chat box, and we would pick these questions up during the Q&A session. Thank you, and we look forward to a very interactive webinar today. I hand over to Mehul now.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. It's what 5:30 a.m. in DC, so I'm not in my formals yet, so apologies for that. Uh, could you please put on the slide deck? So, I'm going to talk about the Urban Heat Handbook that we recently released. I think it was around September 10th that the handbook came out. And why we really wanted this handbook was as we started as an institution searching for ideas on how urban heat adaptation needs to be done, we found some excellent examples in the global north, but not as many in the global south. And that's where, as a development bank, we got started thinking how we could really pull together a sort of a guidebook for policymakers, for practitioners, that will really allow them to engage with the Global Heat Handbook, with solutions, with ideas, how people started planning for, adapting to heat resilience. So essentially, four or five key things. Heat stress is rising. I don't need to belabor that point more. The global south, the in the global south, the distinction between the haves and the have-nots is far wider, and heat impacts the most marginal sections more. And this handbook really tries to get together some of these solutions. So how was it developed? We were building on what we know, so solutions that were already there. Technical rigor, we had multiple rounds of consultations. We had the Atkins Realists and Red Cross teams working with us. But other than that, we had colleagues from across the world. Lenio is here. We had colleagues from the World Bank and from different organizations co-creating the content. There were workshops that were held in Uganda, in Delhi, Bangladesh, really to get people to engage with the content and see how it's done. And then there was a quality enhancement review and then a decision meeting at the World Bank, which allowed us to bring together practitioners from across the world and get them to really engage with the handbook and give us a quality feedback. Next slide, please. So, how have we defined these, the three pieces of the handbook? If one could essentially pick up each of these three pieces and work with them separately. The first one is the summary for policymakers. It's a very short document that really talks to you about how a policymaker could essentially pick it up and start going into targeted policy decision making, looking at what solutions have worked across the world in a consolidated form. It really sets up a strategic direction for how a city could address the challenge of heat resilience. And the technical manual, this is really for people like you and me who are sitting in this call to go through a step-by-step, essentially engaging with the entire agenda of heat stress. So right from the beginning till the end, defining, if you look at it, it even defines, what heat resilience is, what we mean by urban heat, what we mean by urban heat island. So really specific definitions. So if someone picks it up, they could really go into the details. And this is for the technical staff because this allowed them to really start engaging with the concept of heat. And the solutions catalog, I think this is probably the best piece that we developed. It's really looking at solutions from across the world, which allows people to see how cities have, come up with these solutions. And now what we are working on is some of these videos that really pull out material from the solutions catalogs, have mayors talking to you about how heat has been addressed in their context. Next slide, please. So next slide, please. So in a sense, there are these five principles that we've worked with. The first one is start small and start now. The second one is make the journey together. So, different cities are at different stages, but, how do you come together and start working on it? Clear mandates for long term. So, there could be cities that are dealing with heat at this very moment, and they have short-term solutions, something that is more immediate, but really start planning for heat in the long run. And then tailoring heat management to the city. So really looking at nature-based solutions, water bodies, how the overall urban landscape comes together in the context of heat. And then, the fifth principle actually goes back to really the solutions catalog, really looking at what has worked in all of these, all of this, all similar concepts in the global south, and could you apply those into your city? Next slide, please. So again, this is probably my last slide. How we've broken down the entire concept of heat resilience in the handbook is right at the top is the assessing the heat risk. So what is the heat risk? What is the population that is really impacted by it? Then planning for it, really mapping plans. So a lot of cities have come up with heat resilience plans. I'm sure we'll touch upon those in greater detail during the conversation. And then how do you respond to some of these heat waves? and setting up SOPs, setting up systems that allow you to address some of those heat waves. And then all of these, when put together, is what really gives us the heat resilient solutions. At the bank, what I struggle with still is, once you've all done all of this, how do you finance it? And I think during the conversation that we have in the panel discussion, I would really like to touch upon the financing bit a bit more. So I'll stop here. Back to you, Mini. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mehul, for a very insightful, taking us through the handbook very quickly. And with that, I hand over to Dr. Eleni Marivili. Linio, you are on mute.
Got it. Got it. Can you hear me? Oops. Yes. Hello. Thanks, Minnie, for the introduction. And I would like to speak and follow up Mehul's presentation as one of the reviewers among several other experts that were very, very happy to see this handbook come together. And as a former city administrator, I wish I had this when I when I was working with my city trying to plan on heat a few years ago. So let me talk a little bit about why this handbook is really important for cities. Mehul already touched on these things, but I want to kind of emphasize 4 points that I think are really important. First of all, a lot of guidelines and support for cities to create heat action plans are using data and resources or have kind of reference, usually information that comes from the global north. In the global south, as Mehul said, cities are much more vulnerable to extreme heat. And the data, resources, and infrastructure constraints there are very different. So this particular handbook offers context-appropriate strategies that actually work on the ground for for the global south. The second, which is really important, is that unlike other technical tools that usually stop at assessment, the handbook gives a step-by-step framework that moves from understanding the problem to implementing solutions. So from explaining the science and helping design appropriate heat assessments to helping cities move towards urban planning, figuring out the governments that is needed, including community engagement. It takes you really by the hand to show you, based on what kind of capacities you have, how to move forward to implementation. Third, it's meant to be accessible. It emphasizes what kind of tools cities already have. It emphasizes low cost and scalable and inclusive approaches, enabling basically local governments and planners and communities to create, to be effective in their heat management strategies. And finally, it's about equity. As we all know, urban heat doesn't affect everybody equally. It hits the poorest and the most vulnerable the hardest. So the handbook really helps cities design fair, cross-sectoral responses that protect those that are most at risk. And so basically, I really believe in this handbook. I don't think it's another planning tool. I think it's practical, inclusive, and really very clearly articulating how global South cities can deal with the challenges and change them into possibilities of shielding themselves and creating heat resilience. And I think also this tool is a really, really important tool for what we're planning, which is this implementation drive called Beat the Heat, which UNEP and the COP30 presidency in Brazil have started designing months ago. It has used as a springboard the Global Cooling Pledge that was signed 2 years ago by more than 70 countries. And the idea is to support nation to local implementation. So we call it an implementation drive, Beat the Heat implementation drive, and it brings together country and city governments, expert partners, creating a movement in a way to build local capacity and strengthen data planning and implementation of solutions that can help save lives and livelihoods and make cities more livable for a much hotter future. So as I said, the goal is to help cities move from awareness to action, and the handbook is absolutely a great tool to have for all this kind of movement that we're trying to build, to have like a very clearly actionable, data-based and forward-looking set of guidelines for the global south is amazing. To have a translation of science all the way to practical implementation will be a really, really important tool to have as we move forward with Beat the Heat, which is this big, big movement we're building right now, and we hope that you will be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Linus, so much. And I think this is really helpful for cities, for planners who would have joined us today to really understand how to go about, changing knowledge, science into evidence-based action, on-ground action. And with this, we would now move on to the panel discussion. We have global experts who've joined us from diverse organizations today who have joined us in the panel. And we could start with Jules, who has joined us from Google. And as we are all aware, Google is a pioneer in data, in mapping, in AI. And we would really like to hear from you, Jules, that, how, if you could share a case study of how cities have, used Google AI, Google tools to really understand the interventions that would help them, on ground, or the policy changes that are required for, embedding heat resilience in cities. Over to you, Jules.
Yeah, I mean, great question and very excited to be here. What we do at Google is we are using AI to try to provide cities with information that they need to address extreme heat. So over the years, we developed a few different products from our Tree Canopy. Tree Canopy was our first product. It's already available in more than 2,000 cities. The idea is that we are using AI, geospatial imagery, just as a way to help cities assess their tree coverage and better plan for urban forestry initiatives. Later, we also developed other tools, Cool Roofs, that is using AI, to analyze rooftop reflectivity, to help cities identify where they could add reflective surfaces and where it could have the biggest impact. And we are now also piloting in a few cities a new temperature effect modeling product that is leveraging the previous models to build scenarios, help cities understand what happens if I do this intervention or this intervention, helping them getting the data that they need to justify policies and investment. And right now, the feedback that we have is that cities find this really useful. I can walk you through a few case studies. We've seen multiple cities using these tools for policy and for planning. And this is really exciting. And we value this type of partnerships a lot because this is how we can move from building a model, building a product to having real world impact or trying to have real world impact. For example, one case study that we really love is in Stockton, California. We've seen that planners were using our tools, visual data, to build evidence for a new cool roof ordinance in the upcoming climate action plan. The idea is that the Office of Environment and Sustainability was developing a proposal for a new cool roof ordinance. And in order to gain support, they needed compelling visual data to demonstrate the potential benefits to city leadership and to the community. Using a heat resilience tool and the temperature effect modeling feature, they were able to model different scenarios, try to quantify the impact of local temperature reduction based on different type of intervention that they could do by increasing the number of cool roofs or increasing the number of trees across the city. And the impact that we observed is this data and visualization from the tool became the foundation of a formal ordinance proposal that is no part of the cool roof requirements is in Stockton climate action plan that was in place from 2024 to the future 2026. We are also seeing a lot of, many different other success stories. For example, in Phoenix, Arizona, we've seen tree canopy data as a primary source for the city's Shade Phoenix plan, which aims to double the number of trees planted annually. Or in San Antonio, Texas, for example, we've seen that the city was using our modeling tools to demonstrate the potential benefits of better targeting cooling intervention. So, what we see that these examples can demonstrate how this type of close partnership with cities, in cities where we are launching our pilot, can help move from research to real world impact. And we are really excited to hear more case studies like this and bring this tool to more and more cities globally soon. I think.
Thank you, Jules. This is very exciting, and I'm sure you would have a lot of questions which we would take up in the Q&A session. How data could be used to influence and help cities frame their policies or understand locations where more trees are required. I think this is really, going ahead, way forward for cities. And if these are available, accessible to cities, I think this is the way forward. Thank you so much, Jules, and we'll come back to you a little later. We have Jaya with us also from WRI today. And Jaya, we would really like to hear your experience of WRI presence in India, the Indian experience, India having several, institutional challenges. There are resource constraints. So what's really, the cross-sectoral work that WRI does has helped, some of the, enforcing or really embedding urban heat adaptation, mitigation strategies in the municipal planning from the WRI experience, if you could share with us. Thank you, Jaya.
Sure, Minnie, and thank you very much for asking that question. I think, WRI India's experience has largely started out a lot of it with our work on climate action plans, and then moving from plan to implementation and action on the ground. And in two of our major cities, Mumbai and Bangalore, where we started off, and then, of course, there are many other cities where we worked. But what we found is that when it comes to heat and the response to heat adaptation, it really takes hold when cities stop treating it as a standalone issue, and that's true for all of climate risks, but especially heat, that you stop treating it as a standalone issue or an event, but more as a lived reality, which they then have to address, and not just once in the year, when the summer months are there. So the fact that heat has implications for and lasting impacts on people, whether it's their health, productivity, infrastructure, when you're looking at operations, maintenance, costs, longevity of the infrastructure, or ecology, it needs to be understood for cities to weave integrated strategies into their existing urban priorities and planning. So whether it's water management, mobility, housing, blue-green infrastructure planning, whatever it is. So what we also have seen is that embedding heat adaptation in city plans requires, sort of breaking the silos across departments of coordinated action, so that environment, water, housing, urban planning, these departments are working together. And what we found, of course, is that integrated approaches, when you look at, for example, blue, green, gray infrastructure kind of approaches, they yield the most durable and cost-effective outcomes, and also have multiple co-benefits. Because if you're looking at just gray infrastructure, it is solving one problem. But when you're looking at integrated solutions, they are potentially, solving many problems. So, for instance, in cities, we've seen how, through some of our work and the work that cities have been doing is, coupling urban greening, water-sensitive design, like restoring wetlands or water bodies, or integrating permeable surfaces in built-up areas, where that just not reduces temperatures. It does not just reduce temperatures, but also it enhances groundwater recharge, resilience to flooding and similar things. And similarly, for cool roofs and shaded public spaces, especially when you're looking at vulnerable communities. We've also seen success, I think, when heat resilience is mainstreamed into existing planning and investment mechanisms. So, for example, not just through master plans, but government schemes and programs. And India has several, so starting from basic services and programs and schemes on water to housing to sort of other kind of infrastructure provisioning. So rather than treat it as a standalone initiative, if this can be combined with the urban schemes and missions and programs, it should be embedded in not only the ones dealing with housing or built development or climate, but also the ones looking at health, agriculture, basic services provisioning, energy, etc. Because heat has multiple implications, and then we're trying to solve for it. You can also derive multiple co-benefits. So at WRI, I think I would also like to highlight, what Jules was talking about, some of the tools that we have been using. One is on the climate hazard vulnerability assessment. And this is understanding who is vulnerable where, designing context-specific solutions that take into account differential vulnerability. And another one is a product that we're working with along with Google, in fact, which is called the Data for Cool Cities, which can basically help map the multiple dimensions of heat. So you're not just looking at land surface temperature, but also humidity, albedo, green cover, to identify, what the heat hotspots are, overlay them with socioeconomic data to identify where sort of combined cooling, blue-green interventions can have the most impact. So I think embedding this kind of data and insights into development plans will prove to be more sustainable than sort of, taking on isolated pilots, and that's been our experience. But I think development plans, again, to iterate a one pathway, ensuring department budgets and schemes have an understanding of how to factor in heat resilience is very important. And for that, we do need sensitization, we do need capacities. Like you mentioned, there's a resource constraint, but there's also a capacity limitation. So success will really depend on building local capacity, helping municipal agencies design, finance, and then maintain the blue-green infrastructure so that the heat resilience sort of becomes part of everyday urban management. So to end, I'd like to say that ultimately, embedding heat resilience is not about just adding another layer into planning efforts. That's not how one would like to look at it. It's about really thinking about how cities function and for whom. So when heat adaptation is built into everyday systems that make cities work, whether it's drainage, water, sanitation, trees, roofs, streets, when we start embedding it there, can we move closer to creating these urban environments that will protect everyone in the short term from heat stress, but in the long term can help extend our limits to adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaya. This was truly insightful. And, the way you, really explain heat cannot be, handled if it is handled in silos. It is an integrated approach, and it requires multi-sectoral, multi-department, multi-ministries have to be, involved to really find out, solutions which can be implemented then. Thank you, and we will come back to you, Jaya, with another cross-sectoral question later. Over going to Georgia now, who's joined us from UTM. Georgia, we would really like to hear from you. UTM, you've been working with hundreds of cities globally, and so firstly, we wanted to hear what are the main challenges that you see for scaling up these approaches for urban heat adaptation and long-term resilience in cities in different diverse urban contexts. And also, we would like to hear from you the UTM's, city twinning and peer exchange experience and how it has really helped in accelerating long-term heat adaptation and resilience. Over to you, Georgia.
Well, thank you very much, Minnie, for the question, and also thank you for having me in this fantastic conversation of today. Let me start by saying that extreme urban heat is not just a critical threat, but is also becoming more and more a non-negotiable concern for public health, but also for economic stability in a lot, if not most, of the cities globally that we work with. Not only we are seeing an interest from our cities to co-create new solutions, but also to really help inspire other peers and really support this possibility to learn from each other. So you rightly mentioned our urban transition mission is bringing together over 115 cities from 47 countries across the world. And we support them by really connecting the dots and brokering solutions that are existing to help them in their journey to become not only net zero, but also resilient and inclusive. And the first step that we undertake with our cities is really to assess what are the key needs. And out of the 115 cities that we've been working with, 23 of them have flagged cooling as a primary challenge that they are facing. That doesn't, of course, mean that all the others don't feel the threat of extreme heat. As a matter of fact, they call it finding new natural-based solutions, applications. They call it implementing more energy efficiency solutions. But all of them are really feeling the pressure that heat is bringing to us on the ground. And these communities are just small, ambitious, but yet, of course, a small sample of the 13,800 communities that are part of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, and that are also working towards not only decarbonizing, but also ensuring a more resilient future for their citizens across the world. So many of these cities have already been working to engage in cooling in particular. An increasing number have been signing up to the Global Cooling Pledge. This pledge launched at COP28 to address the challenges that can also ensure, of course, sustainable, affordable, but also energy efficient cooling by 2050. And they have signed up in particular for the pledge that really relates to the activities of the subnationals, looking into not only rolling out a scale natural-based solution, green spaces, but also to include as much as possible in their strategies and into their public procurement policy that can support cooling technologies and cooling strategies. Now, I'd like to share a couple of examples of how some of these communities have been turning this commitment into practice, and also to share what others have been learning from their activities as well. And I want to start from Kisumu County in Kenya. Kisumu County has not only been embedding their sustainable cooling into law and practice, but has also made sure that their integrated climate action plan provides a framework that connects cooling practices with their ambition to become 100% renewable. The trajectory and the roadmap of this city does not only talk about energy provision, but also looks into connecting green buildings, sustainable transport, and of course, all the measures of climate adaptation to really pursue this goal of a more sustainable and holistic approach to a greener future. They also have included in their plan a whole greening program to plant trees, to restore wetlands, and to create new shared public spaces that can lower the temperature for the community on the ground. So this type of legislation, these type of frameworks are a great inspiration for other communities across the world that can learn from their practices. I want to travel a little bit more north now and go to a country that maybe you would not associate with extreme heat, with our city, Greater Manchester, in the United Kingdom. They have not only been developing a cooling plan, but also trying to understand how to create a combination that brings together more efficient technical solutions, but also new policies for applying nature-based solutions across the board. And here, for example, I want to talk about their partnership that they have been issuing with private sector company Daikin to explore not only how the city can advance some of these targets, but also how to collaborate with the private sector to advance some of this action and to be able also to train more and more people on the ground, more installers to really apply these technical solutions within the homes of the people that are part of their community. Finally, I want to share one example again that will be of great inspiration to communities across the world coming from Brazil, from the city of Belo Horizonte, where through partnering up with the Singapore ETH Center, facilitated by our mission and by the Innovate for Cities initiative of the Global Covenant of Mayors, the city has been able to develop a digital twin that will support not only effective decision-making, but also really a concrete mapping of all the area where the city is most sensitive to the threat of extreme heat and layer over the information about the most vulnerable parts of that community. So that not only the city can understand where the biggest threats are, but also make informed decision-making for the future on how to advance more strategic collaboration on action. So I will just conclude by sharing a couple of the roadblocks that unfortunately we see based on these experiences still remaining for other communities across the world. First, there is still very much a challenge around financial viability and access for some of these solutions. This connects not only to the uptake from households of some of these technologies, which are still not affordable, but also it extends, for example, to the possibility of cities to use some of these essential tools. I spoke about digital twins. We talked about the potential of digital solutions in planning and forecasting and making decisions on where to intervene and prioritize. So that's still very much unaffordable, especially in the global south for a large part of our community. Mobilizing finance for soft infrastructures, in particular when it relates to medium to long-term investment for green infrastructure and nature-based solutions, remains a great challenge for cities across the world. And then finally, regulatory alignment. That's also something that we see across the board as a still remaining challenge where national building codes, energy standards, zoning laws are still not aligning with this important objective of supporting cooling across the board in cities. So I look forward to the rest of the discussion and thank you very much for the opportunity of sharing what our amazing communities are doing across the world.
Thank you, Georgia. And it's amazing to hear what, various cities are doing and, sharing knowledge, from various cities in the north as well as in the south that you covered today, and also sharing the challenges, which are happening. And this rightly positions us also to go back to Mehul, who is with us. From the World Bank, in really understanding, Mehul, some of the financial instruments that you could speak about or let us know, which really can move cities from this planning phase to into implementation phase and bringing resilience for long term heat resilience. Over to you, Mehul.
Thanks, Minnie. I'd like to start with giving a couple of, bullets on what really the bank does on heat stress and on cooling. So it is an agenda that has, really come to strength probably about 2 to 3 years back. And we started working. The first real piece of work that happened was in East Asia, actually, called the Unlivable Study. Really looks at 3 levels, right? The top level, really at the regional level, how heat would impact the region. At the second level, really going down to the countries and the city level, and then down to the city level, where it really looks at the interaction of heat with different aspects of life. So livability, employability, how really the citizens interact with it. In fact, one of my colleagues, Nick Jones, has also come up with something called community campaigns, where we do transect studies of temperature around cities and really interact with community members to try and understand how are they dealing with heat stress. So, the vendor on the road versus someone walking down the street, how really are they adapting to heat? So I think that's the body of work that we are doing, for each region. The one for East Asia is already done. The one for ECA and for LAC are already out. And I'm currently working on the South Asia piece at this moment. So we hope to have that out next year. Other than that, what we've really found in terms of financing heat stress, and that goes back to Minnie, your question, is if you try and do a full scale heat resilience sort of strategy, that really we have not been able to finance till now. And Jaya mentioned Jaya and you both mentioned the multi-sectoral nature of heat, and that's what really makes it challenging. But what we've been able to do is, in projects that we've financed, we've been able to look at heat insurance products, for instance. That those have worked very well. Our colleagues at IFC have been working with companies that are into the cooling business, and helped finance some of the most sustainable, interventions, both upstream, which is something like the Tech Emerge, which was really pilots for innovative solutions for cooling, right? So energy efficient, low cost solutions, and really help those companies scale up through the Tech Emerge program. At the bank, we've obviously been involved with the Montreal Protocol for over a decade now, over 2 decades actually now. But other than that, we've been working on energy efficiency, right? So looking at cooling from an energy efficiency perspective, and that's found a lot of bite with the clients. Uh, I'm currently working on two very interesting projects in India, which I think have a lot of relevance to how we think about financing. So the first one is really looking at sustainable cooling, but really looking at it from a perspective of manufacturing. And when you start looking at something from a perspective of manufacturing, you start having to look at it from multiple dimensions, right? So really looking at what are the supply chains. So that's the supply chain risk. What are the minimum energy performance standards? So that's where the energy part of it comes in. Looking at the training and skill development that needs to go in for people to be able to manufacture at scale and at a cost viable manner. And then really to look at how are these products really being adopted. So that's a program that we are currently working on with Government of India, with about 5 different ministries. And for us, it's been quite a challenge bringing together these 5 ministries. The other project that we are really looking at from a financing perspective is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the Prime Minister's affordable housing program in India. Uh, Again, this program's been around for over 40, 45 years. Anyone who's from India would know this. And the big challenge with that program is that while it's for providing affordable housing to citizens, it really does not put in the right metric to test resilience, and specifically heat resilience. India is a very warm country. So that's really what the work that we're doing with the government is right now. So how do you take this existing program where the government is already committed about I want to say $10 billion, to really influence that program to start looking at heat and materials that are heat resilient down to the last beneficiary. It's that would require us to create a market for sustainable products. It will also require us to train people. It will also require us to provide financing where it is not available, right? So I think that's the entire chain of things that we are working on. Uh, what I really wish for is one project where we can work with the city and work on heat resilience end to end. I know, the UNEP team worked with Chennai with our colleagues at the bank to try and pull together a plan, but really to take that plan to now implementation is where the real success lies. So I'll stop here. Happy to take questions at the end.
Thank you, Mehul. And I think also very important, aspect that you were trying to, I think, bring about is also passive or sustainability in cooling, like, in PMAY, or, so the passive aspect becomes also cost efficient or cost effective, you see. So I think that's also an important aspect that we need to see while we're looking at, heat resilience in long term. And I would like to go now. Thanks, Mehul. Go to Linio, back to you again. Linio, you've worked at global scales, at local scales, and this is like we really wish to hear from you. What are those institutional changes or policy levers that are required to, to embed uh, urban resilience, heat resilience at national level, climate strategies and framework? Over to you, Linio.
I think Mehul touched upon something that is a great example, which is to identify what are the existing policies and programs that the national government is planning or has already pledged funds and has budgets behind, and then try to incorporate in those plans the criteria, the heat resilience criteria and cooling criteria. And this is like super important. And this possibility of creating capacity within different ministries so that they can figure out how to integrate heat into the programs that they already have. Because as we already established, and Georgia and Jaya and many other people said it very clearly, this is a very much a multi-sectoral issue, right? So we have, from the Ministry of any kind of ministry, from transportation to energy to social welfare to any type of ministry, to of course to labor. All of them have a lot of there is a lot of opportunity to create safer environments and directly linked to realities, urban realities mostly, on the ground. So in order to figure this out, we have governance issues, and we have very few countries that have actually created teams that bring together people from the different ministries that can all together understand where are the most important challenges and how they can embed them in existing programs. And this needs hand holding. And this is why I think the World Bank, the different agencies like UNEP, UNDRR, UN Habitat, etc., can actually, WHO, etc., can actually help governments figure out how to put in existing and future programs, budgets, etc., the needed capacities so that we can start dealing with the heat that we are already facing, but also we will be facing in the future. And for this, I think we have a really important role to play. Multilateral banks as well. And of course, city networks, which also have an incredible reach to all of these cities around the world, but can actually inform upward the work that can be done and is done in cities to give best practices and solutions at the national level.
Thank you, Linio. I do see a lot of participants writing in the Q&A, but I hardly see any really like a question. This is more of information that I see people putting in our Q&A box. Um, so if there are any really pressing questions, then I would really request participants to kindly post them in the chat box. Okay, there is a question for Jules. How can cities in the global south use the heat resilience tool? Currently, I see it has been piloted in 14 cities in the US. Over to you, Jules.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and like part of the what else we're doing. Like I want to say like these tools is right now like we are piloting the tools, still in pilot phase. So trying to get a feedback, understand like how like a few pilot cities are using the tool and what we can learn from them using the tool. We're already piloting the tool in additional city, for example, in Hyderabad in India, to provide valuable insights on specific needs. But we need to learn. So I cannot share like detailed roadmap or like any like long-term expansion plan. But I'm excited. Like I mean, we are excited to bring this to more and more cities globally. I also one thing I want to emphasize that historically, like Google Research always had like a big commitment to Global South with many products, like from our flood forecasting, no casting product, or even open buildings that can be used for urban planning. That was Global South first product. So that's definitely something of interest to us. Just no roadmap to share today.
It actually would be great, Jules, if you could share with us here on the chat a few of the open source tools that you have that could help cities with different planning efforts.
Yeah.
And also, I have to add that we are hoping, and we are in discussions, hoping to bring the resilience tool into the Beat the Heat program, if not immediately, but as soon as possible, so that we can help cities in the Global South actually plan best, because this is an amazing resource. And we are very glad that Google has developed such a super duper tool that can help cities deal with heat.
Yeah, I mean, let me share a few links in the chat for what is already accessible externally, and then happy to follow up on the Beat the Heat initiative.
Thank you. Thank you, Jules. There is one more question. How can we reduce heat effect for climate like Pakistan other than tree plantation? I think, Jaya, Mehul, um, any one of you could answer.
Sure, I think, geographically, Pakistan, India, they're very sort of similar, and especially the northern parts, very similar sort of heat profiles. In India also last year, just the first 15 days of April, about 90% of the population was very impacted due to heat, and April is just the spring month, right? So I think to answer the question, apart from basically greening, there are a lot of things that can be done, both on the energy side. There's things that can be done from water, from the perspective of water, from the built environment side. There are sort of cooling solutions which are available in terms of the built environment itself. So there's, passive cooling that can be achieved with certain types of architecture and certain types of cooling products and solutions which are available. I also think that there are a lot of these existing practices and historical practices that we've had in our countries, which we've kind of moved away from. I think reviving some of those historical practices, whether it's like, wells and, different kinds of architectural practices, I think would be a great thing. And then, of course, innovative solutions. You would have to surface some of those, whether they are physical solutions, digital solutions, financial solutions on top. I also think that in terms of, what we are seeing in our cities and what's working is really, when you're looking at integrated solutions, it's not just about greening, it's about, creating more sort of permeable surfaces. It is about creating more greenery in general, and kind of enhancing the blue-green infrastructure that you might have lost in your cities. What are the ways in which you can revive those? I think that is one of the big things that possibly can be done. But I think a lot of it has to do with built environments. Also, our energy and our cooling solutions are sometimes not very efficient. So you have, highly dense, packed environments, packed densities. Within that, you have air conditioners running, which are kind of spewing the hot air back into the environment and creating more sort of heat islands. So how do you look at some of these the cooling sort of devices and the appliances that we use, which can be made more efficient, and then how can you reduce the need for those cooling appliances is something that we need to focus on. Thank you.
So there was a question by Rohit on what the bank has done in housing, especially with regard to heat elsewhere in the world. So Rohit, I'll like to point you to a few things that the bank has been doing. Heat is something that we've more recently started working on, but housing and resilience is something that the bank has worked on for decades. So, post-reconstruction housing after floods, earthquakes, cyclones, that's something that we've done for a very, very long time. And that typically comes with an element of financing and building back better. Right. So really the use of materials, the use of designs, passive, now really looking at passive cooling, that's really becoming a thread now. And a lot of these solutions, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in India, in Bihar, post-Kosi, we have done housing. Uttarakhand, we've done housing after the floods. Andhra Pradesh, we've done housing after the cyclones, and really the idea is, how do you build back in a more resilient manner? What are the critical pieces that need to be put in place, whether it is from a standards perspective, whether it's from a quality of construction perspective, whether it's training the technician perspective. And some of those things have typically been missing in the global south, and that's really the thrust of the work that we do. And heat is now becoming a part of those. So, for example, on PMAY, as I mentioned, and then there is an initiative that we have ongoing in East Africa. So, I'd be happy to share some of those details with you offline, and I can share some of the projects where you can really engage with them. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Mehul. And there is, I see Linio and Georgia, but Linio first, please go ahead.
Sorry, guys, very quickly, I wanted to just say to the question that I saw, first of all, in the previous question about greening, I think that you should really look, whoever asked, you should take a look at the handbook, which is available online, and it has really, really great solutions. At the very last part, it also has and organize all of the different solutions that are possible. Especially with green and blue infrastructure, but as well as other things like shading and etc. But about how to integrate an adaptation, how to create integrated adaptation strategies within cities breaking silos. I think the one thing that I can say about that is that it's kind of crucial. It's often very helpful to have a dedicated person that can bring the different departments and the different sectors together when they are designing resilience, sustainability. And it could be somebody that is generally the resilience and sustainability person, or the climate person, or the heat person if they have one. But often these offices, when created, they can reach across, create teams, and work together in a much more integrated way. So I think governance needs to change in cities to be able to create these types of more integrated planning.
Thank you, Linio. Over to you, Georgia.
Thank you very much. And I actually wanted also to respond to the same question from Oliver about integrated planning locally. Our cities are sharing a general goal that is to become net zero climate neutral by a certain date that they have been defining. In that process, they are trying to bring together not only the conversation about decarbonization, but also everything else that relate to not only the inclusivity, but also the resilience of the city. Some of them are co-developing across department climate action plans that include all of these different strategies. Others are set up specific task forces that are supporting them not only to co-organize internally, but also to reach out to the community, to local private sectors and others, to make sure that that co-creation process actually happens with the engagement of all the different stakeholders locally towards a one common goal. One thing that I want to also share is that when we do city-to-city cooperation, of course, we talk about the solutions, what is being implemented, the technologies, but the governance piece is also an essential part of that conversation. So if we are really serious about scaling some of the solutions that we've been discussing today, I think it's not only important to have that conversation about governance, but also thinking about how do we move out by the single standing project, the single standing little pilot that we do in one individual cities, we get out of what sometimes looks like a cemetery of pilots very often, right? They don't get to the scale that they should, and start to thinking more systemically about what is the change that we want to make to the medium to long-term objective that we have. So happy to share more of the experiences of our cities, of course, with the audience here. And yes, do not ever forget that the exchange on the governance part is absolutely essential to make this work.
Thank you so much, Georgia. And with this, I have to thank all the speakers. We are 2 minutes up over time beyond our webinar. Thank you so much, all the speakers, experts who've joined us today. I think it was truly a great knowledge exchange session. And I'm sure all the members joined us today would really take huge advantage of, of the knowledge that was shared and really changing, having scientific evidence, to planning and to really on-ground implementation of law to achieve long-term resilience in cities. With that, we come to a closure, and I also would like to inform that, there would be a recording available for all the participants, and also an article will be shared from this webinar with the participants. And also, there is one last announcement that all the Cool Coalition members kindly join in the upcoming, the coordination call of the Cool Coalition. And with that, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us today.